Jitsu master and the squid.
The Jitsu Master and the Squid.
The Jitsu master and the squid.
The Jitsu Master and the Squid.
Welcome back to the Jitsu Master and the Squid show. We got a very special guest. One of my favorite guys to listen to, watch, and shoot. All around great guy. Chael Sonnen. How you doing, man?
Never better, man. I tell you what, I'm a little bit sore. And I'm a little bit tired, but I'm happy to be here.
Man. How you going to be sore and tired after taking out... You're originally a middleweight. You were the best Chael Sonnen I've ever seen was a middleweight until Saturday night. Then I saw Chael Sonnen come up to heavyweight and defeat Rampage Jackson. How many takedowns did you get in that fight? I remember two.
I know I had at least one around, so I'm gonna call it three. I might have slipped a fourth one in there, but we'll call it three. How's that?
We can call it three. So how's that bet going? Is he gonna pay up on that?
Yeah, he texted me on Monday and he asked me for my address, and he said the same thing. He goes, hey, I think you had three, maybe you had four. Speak now or forever hold your peace, or I'm sending you a check for three. When I get that check, I'm not cashing it for the record, but I did think that was a very stand-up move by him because we did have a deal. We had a bet. I thought it was a stand-up move by Rampage. It actually made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. You know, after I got the win, that was good motivation going into the fight, but when it was done, it made me feel a little bit weird. I won't cash it, but I do appreciate it. Put it that way.
You should donate it to USA Wrestling. Down to the USA Wrestling Fund.
Right there, but no, Rampage worked hard for the money. He's got a family, man. I know what it's like, so I'm not taking anything from him.
Man, you're too. That's like the kindest gangster in the world, right there, Chael Sonnen, man.
Yeah.
So you say you're sore from the fight, but not tired from the fight. Where's the soreness? Is it muscle soreness or is it bruising from damage from trading blows?
Yeah, a little bit of that, man. I've never really been in a fight that was like this. For example, I don't know if he ever hit me in the head, but he hit my body for 15 minutes, and he hit so hard. You know, he's a very strong man. Even when I locked up with him, I could feel it. He was just a strong man. And, he dug to my body a few times. He hit me in the chest. I was telling my mother, I said, man, my chest hurts, and she won't hear it. She's teasing me. She said, "Oh, so he punched you in your boob? Is that what you're saying?" So I quit complaining when people quit listening. But the truth was I was pretty sore.
Nice. So you're in the semifinals of the heavyweight tournament. You can face the winner of Fedor and Frank Mir. Did you ever think in your career that you would get a chance to fight either the Pride heavyweight champion or the UFC heavyweight champion, Frank Mir?
At heavyweight, no, man. I had all sorts of fantasies in this sport, but no, I never really dreamed of heavyweight. Maybe in the very beginning, you know, I first got interested in this sport as a fan in 1993, and then I had my first kind of workouts in it. Actually, the first guy I ever worked out with was Tank Abbott, and that was in 95. But the point was, back then, if you guys will remember, there was no weight classes. This is before, you know, finally they came along with this thing called light heavyweight, where Frank Shamrock took over,
under 200.
But back then it was just one weight, one big group. So I used to think about having to beat Dan Severns and, you know, Tank Abbotts and guys like this. But by the time I finally got around to competing, they already had, you know, started the weight class phenomenon. And so no, to your question, no, I never thought about heavyweight.
Wow, it's pretty cool because, you know, if I would have seeded the tournament, no offense, I would have probably had you as maybe the 6 or the 7 seed, but just based on the amount of heavyweights. I think a lot of guys would be surprised you're in the semifinals, and I think Rampage was a great matchup. I think you match up really well against that side of the bracket. I think wrestling could be the hindrance of those guys.
Yeah, it could be. You know, it could be. We'll have to go out and see. It's really hard with. I struggle with that size, man. I mean, I learned a few things in that fight. I guess some things that I got in mind that I'm going to work on for whoever's next, Fedor or Frank. But it's interesting. You know, there's some dark horses too. I think the winner of Mo and Bader is a handful for whoever's going to run into them. So we'll see what happens on the other side of the bracket too. It's fun.
It's very fun.
On your side of the bracket with Fair and Mador coming up, what is your preference? I mean, Fedor is the smaller guy of the two, but Mir is not the wrestler that you are. He's got good jiu-jitsu, but he's nowhere near the wrestler you are. Which of those two fights would you prefer, style-wise?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that too, and I don't know who's going to win that. I think that I think Mir, when he's really sharp, is a superior fighter. I do have to admit, though, when Mir took his last layoff, which was after that motorcycle wreck, but he came back, it took him a little bit to get his feet under him. I think he lost 4 in a row, and then he went on to, contend for a world championship again. So if it's a sharp Frank Mir, it's one of those things where you kind of have to wait and see. Frank is very big. When I saw him this weekend, I would guess he goes about 280.
Yeah.
He's not quite in fight camp yet. I imagine some of that weight will come off, but he'll probably weigh in at 265 and no less than 260. And Eve, to your point, Fedor gets in there about 236, 237 consistently, and I think that size might matter. So I don't know. I'm going to wait and just let it play out, and then I'll leave it to my coaches. They'll come up with the plan and the strategy. I'll show up to practice, do what's asked of me, and we'll go from there.
Nice. When you found out about this tournament, did you have to put on any weight, or did you just stay where you were? Do you usually walk around about 225?
Yeah, I walk around about 225. I tried to get in the ring about 214. I like to be a little bit lighter. I just feel like I move a little better and I can scramble better if I ever get in those positions. So I try to get a little weight off. I ended up weighing in about 220. But, in California, they weigh you in the day of the fight as well. And I was doing the water load, so I was drinking a gallon a day. So I think I got on the scale maybe a little heavy because right before the fight I was 216. Still a little heavier than my goal of 214, but I felt like I was moving all right.
Did you find that Rampage was moving slower than you've seen him since he was, 250? Do you think the weight gain for him hindered his performance?
Well, I think at least in that aspect, that'd be fair. At least in the movement, the lighter guy is going to move a little bit better. That's just good logic right there. But as far as when we got in close and could throw power, yeah, he was strong. There was times I was on top of him, and I could just feel like his hands were in position. He was so strong. I could feel I can't move. I can't sit up to say posture and try some ground and pound because he's going to explode and be out. I had to just hold him and hope that he would look for a different position, and then maybe that give me some opportunity. So in certain positions, that size and strength was really helpful. But to your point of the movement, yeah, I think the bigger guy, initially moves a little slower.
Now, during the fight, you both slowed down a bit, but he slowed down. He's a bigger, heavier guy. And Rampage, when you see Rampage that size, you think he's a bit out of shape. Was the carrying that weight, was that what kind of hindered you or slowed you down towards? Because carrying that much more weight and pushing a guy that big around for that long has got to drain on everybody. So is that the biggest part of why you slowed down later on in the fight?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'd have to go back and rewatch it. I have a hard time remembering fights. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot. Every time we locked up, it was a lot. I would use so much energy, just straining in there to try to keep my underhook or keep my elbow high or keep some position. So, yeah, the size was a factor. It's something I think I can get used to if I get the right bodies in practice and in the training environment. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, it's different. Randy Couture used to talk about this a lot. He'd be getting ready, he was about 2 1/4 and going against Tim Sylvia's and the Rico Rodriguez's and the Josh Barnett, some of these big guys, and he would always talk about an angle. He had to throw his punches and slip outside so he could get an angle. I never knew what the hell he was talking about. I didn't know anything about that. When I fought guys that were my own size, I didn't need an angle. I could take them straight on. If I exploded and if I exploded and I had the right setup, I could take them off their feet. But now I get it. Even though that was in 2002 and 2003, I remember those conversations. I remember those training sessions where Randy was always talking about an angle. And when I found my angles on Rampage, I could off-balance him. But when I took him straight on, man, it was like running into a brick wall.
Yeah, that's a big guy. Now, you fought main event for both of the biggest promotions in the country, 2 of the biggest promotions in the world. Is there a difference in fighting for these companies, for the UFC and for Bellator?
There's a lot more similarities than there are differences. The rules are the same. The atmosphere, meaning the cage, one's got the octagon and Bellator's got their. It's the same thing to me, man. I don't know the difference. And so there's a lot more similarities. The walkout is different from a production standpoint, but, the crowd is just as loud, and I got the same cornermen and coaches. So For me, it's always felt the same. Even the days in say Bodog or WEC or a ring versus a cage, I really never knew the difference. The rules were the same, and I was going to go as hard as I could go. And if that was enough to get it done, I'd win. And if it wasn't, I wasn't going to win. It was pretty straightforward.
And when you're backstage before the fight, how much, especially as the main event, how many of the other fights do you pay attention to? Did you see any of these young guys that you think, man, that guy's going to be a star one day?
I watched them all. It's one of the hardest parts for me is I'm such a fan of the sport. My career will end the same way it began, which is just being a fan. So, yeah, you look at Aaron Pico, the flat nasty, he throws a kick, dicks outside and digs to the ball. I was screaming at the TV as soon as he landed that punch, stop the fight. I didn't know if the ref knew, hey, this guy's not getting up, man. That shot would put an elephant down. Michael Chandler, who I believe is the best guy Bellator has under contract, arguable now with what we saw from Rory, but I think that Chandler's the guy. I thought that was a great performance by him. You look at Rory McDonald, a one-legged man in an ass-whipping contest, and he finds a way to win. Really inspiring performance. I thought Lima looked awesome. I thought Lima lived up to all the hype. He went 25 minutes with Rory, knocked Rory down. He run around against Rory. Nobody does those things. He did all three of them in one night. I think he really proved to everybody, yeah, he was the guy. Now he falls down to what, number one contender? So, still a pretty damn good spot he's in. I had a great time. I enjoyed all the matches, and I was very impressed.
Speaking of the Lima McDonald fight,
steal the show. Guy goes out there, he's got one leg, he can't even use it, he's fully mounted, he's getting pummeled, but he won't give up, and somehow he figures out a way to come back and win. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
How'd you score that fight?
The Rory fight at 3-2? Is that how the judges had it?
Some had it 4-1.
Yeah, I
They had
thought it was
49-45,
3-2.
one judge.
Than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit closer than that too, but it was a really good fight. Also, one of your former trading partners, one of your guys from the Ultimate Fighter, Guilherme Vasconcelos, Bomba. I cornered him for that fight. He looked really good. How did you like his performance?
Ba-da-da-da-da-Bomba. Oh, man, I get so nervous when Bomba fights. I hate it. Yeah, he looked great, man. Bomba can do that to a lot of guys. Now, he's in a competitive weight class. Guys can beat him, and he can beat guys, and it's a matter of who fights the best on that day. And, when he goes out there and really does what he trains so hard, man. He takes punches and kicks from Joe Schilling 3 days a week. Who wants to do that, right? So, this guy puts in his time. He does some heavy lifting, and when he went back to his roots, the ground game, found that choke and executed it. Yeah, man, it was a cool feeling.
Yeah, he's always talking about how much information and how much things he's learned from you, some of the confidence that he's gained from you. You've been a big influence on him, man, and I love the kid. So I want to say thank you too, because I've been helping him for the past couple of months and for the past couple of years that I've known him actually. And you've been a big influence on him, man. He really looks up to you.
Eve, that makes me feel wonderful. I appreciate you saying that, and thank you also for working with him. But yeah, he's good people. You meet some really good guys in this sport. Hey, by the way, so Eve, you and I were talking about Dustin Poirier. You saw, of course, that got him versus Gaethje. That's on.
Yeah, it is. I don't like that fight for Dustin. He had a very competitive fight with Eddie Alvarez that most people believe that I felt that he was winning, and then Gaethje just lost to Alvarez. It's kind of a step back in my opinion. But it's what the fans want to see, and he's agreed to do it. So I wish him the best in that, and I will do everything I can to help and support him in it. But I don't like the fight.
It's a main event, though. I think it's a big opportunity. I was on board, but I come from a little different perspective than you do because of your personal relationship with him. But I loved it, man. When I woke up, it was one of the first pieces of news that I saw on the MMA sites. Yeah, I popped for that. First thing I did is check the date and go, okay, how long do I have to wait to see this? I like it. I think that's going to be a good draw.
It's an amazing fight, man. As a fan, I love it. The personal thing is the reason why I'm not crazy about it. But as a fight fan, my mouth is watering.
Yeah, exactly. I love those matches. There's never really been a better time to be an MMA fan. Coker's always been on board with whatever the biggest fight is, let's do it. Yeah. But Dana has always been real disciplined to keep guys in their division. He really believes in that. And lately, he's kind of loosened up, and now all of a sudden, well, one, we saw what Conor did, but now what are we promised right now? Cyborg versus Amanda. We would have never got that under that old, disciplined mindset that Dana had. Now that he's kind of loosened up, we're going to get that big fight. Now they're talking about Stipe versus Cormier. I mean, it's really a fun time to be an MMA fan. We just got St. Pierre and Bisping, all because Dana kind of goes, all right, I'll loosen up a little bit here. And I'm glad he did. As a fan, I'm having a lot of fun.
Well, and you possibly fight, you're definitely going to fight a heavyweight next. It's like it's kind of throwback time. People fighting in different weight classes, kind of pride style in a way of just make the match that's exciting and give fans some interesting style matchups that are exciting.
Yeah, that's right. Just make the match people want to see. I believe in that too. And, we take our cues from boxing, right? They came along first and they were the original combat sport. Boxing has always done that. Boxing has always built guys and then they go and put them against each other. They agree on some made-up weight class, whatever it takes to get those guys in the ring together. That's always been the way it was done. And, we saw some resistance for years, but now that the leaders of the industry are loosening up on that, I'm just speaking purely as a fan, I love the parity. I absolutely love the things that we're seeing right now.
Now, you just brought up boxing, which is a part of mixed martial arts. I want to bring up sport jiu-jitsu and no-gi grappling, which is another part of it. And you have a no-gi competition. How do people get involved? How do you get guys to how do you submit to get into your tournaments, man?
Yeah, so a lot of it, it's kind of evolved. When it first started, we would go after guys. We would go to them and invite them to come. And then after a few, maybe one or two events, they started coming to us. We have a website. There's ways to do it. Or, I'm a pretty easy guy to reach. Twitter, social media. I mean, I don't know all the different ways, and we've got matchmakers and ways to do it. But I spent a lot of time at those events, and I competed in this last Abu Dhabi and went around, and there was a lot of networking going on there. It's really a pretty small community, Yves. If you know one or two guys, 7 or 8 guys at gyms, you can get a hold of anybody out there. So everybody works together, and the cream kind of rises to the top. But that's been a lot of fun, and you also brought up combat jiu-jitsu, which exclusively is being done by Eddie Bravo right now. Yep. But I'm into that. He's got Vinny is going to take on Gordon Ryan coming up in combat jiu-jitsu. That's a good match.
So you're digging that open palm striking with the jiu-jitsu.
I think that it's a great in-between. I came from wrestling, and then you go right into fighting, and there was a little bit of shock in that. I really think that the combat is a great go-between. I also think it's probably something that our youth are going to be able to do. Maybe a 14, 15, 16-year-old. It's something they can do. So that it doesn't just have to be so much, jump right into the deep end of the pool. So I'm always open to opportunity, and it seems like he's creating a new opportunity for people that want to participate.
As a competitor, Chael, are you exclusive to Bellator, or is there a possibility that we could see Chael Sonnen over in Ryzen or some of the Japanese promotions?
Well, so I'm exclusive with Bellator, but with that said, I know that Coker has sent guys before. King Mo's a great example. He sent Mo over there. So if that came up, I don't know what his relationship is business-wise with the Japanese and how all that came about. But if he called me one day and said, Chael, I'd like you to go and do this, it'd be a good opportunity, and I would say yes. But officially, yet, all of us are under exclusive contract. But there is a little room, should the president want you to go.
I'd love to see Chael over in Japan, man.
Oh yeah.
The way you fight and the way you are on a mic, you would be like gold in Japan. I mean, you're gold here, but you'd just be a different kind over there. It'd be great.
Well, I appreciate that. I never got to fight in Japan. I got to wrestle there once, and I did fight. I fought a couple times, but it was pancrase. It was very small. They were very hard fights, but it was very small attendance. And I would love to have, maybe some of those experiences, Eve, like the old Pride days, some stuff that's not even around, but those big experiences in Japan, that could be a real kick. Good memory.
Yeah, Ryzen's doing a pretty good job kind of recreating that in a bit. If you watch the previous New Year's show, they did it looks just like Pride. I think they copied the production down to a T. It's pretty beautiful.
It sounded like it. Yeah, it was fun, man. I like those matches. They're another one that are guilty of just go out there and have some fun. And sometimes we do see some too big of mismatches for my taste, but still have a good time.
So Fedor's fighting Frank Mir in April. I guess the semifinals wouldn't be till a while after that. How long are you going to take off from training camp, or are you going to compete in your own grappling company in the meantime? Because it's probably going to be about 5-6 months before we see you in the cage again, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I try to take a week off from the gym. I went in on Monday. We got a couple of guys that left on Tuesday to fight in Bellator this Friday, so I just went in as a quick send off. But I think I'll stay home the rest of the week and then get back in the gym and stay busy. But I would like a competition sometime this summer, even if it is a grappling event. So we'll see what happens there. I don't have a date for the semifinals, so I don't quite know how all of that's going to structure and play out, but. I do agree with you. It's a long time to wait.
Yeah. And then, so if Fedor wins, will you bring in some of the old Team Quest guys that got a chance to fight Fedor? Like Dan Henderson beat him. Matt Lindland got a chance to fight him, even though Fedor grabbed the ropes.
Good memory.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'll bring them in, but I might get on the phone with them. I don't know how all that's going to go. We'll let it all play out. And you never know, man, in this sport or even in tournaments in general, things change. It could be Fedor, it could be Frank, it could be neither one of them, and they're putting Czech Congo in there as an alternate. You never know what's going to happen, so I really just focus on myself. I'm very selfish when it comes to that, and just make sure I'm as ready as I can be, and whoever's standing across from me, we're going to fight.
Now, you said you won't bring those guys in, but do you still train with Lindland? Is he still in the gym with you?
So Lindland actually took a job. He is the head wrestling coach. He's the highest ranking wrestling coach for Greco-Roman wrestling, and he works out of the headquarters in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. I just saw him on Sunday. So I fought on Saturday. I flew home, and then he was hosting an event. Our coach and teammate Robert Fallis passed away, and we had like an open mat and kind of a memorial service for him. So I saw Matt. Randy was in town. But no, Matt is not involved with MMA anymore. Exclusively wrestling.
Nice.
Yeah, my condolences to you guys on Robert.
Yeah.
Robert was a great guy, man. When he came down with
You knew him.
Yeah, he came down
Yeah,
to Houston
yeah.
for the IFL, and I got to really get to know him on that trip. And ever since then, we've been good. But yeah, that was hard to hear, man. I'm sorry. You have all my best wishes with you guys.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it was a big surprise. I just feel terrible for him and hope he's in a better place. And Eve, there's just no more sense you can make out of those situations. And sometimes you're best to just leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. But Chael, no, this has been your fight, man. This past weekend, great fight. When you look at the rest of the matchups, I as someone who knows the fight game so well, I do want to ask you. I want to ask you to give us a quick breakdown of some of the other matchups on the other side of the bracket with Mitrione and Roy Nelson, and then of course Bader and King Mo. How do you see those two fights playing out?
Yeah, so, okay, I mean, I think that's a really hard draw, Mitrione and Roy Nelson. I think if you weren't doing a tournament and you were to just follow the traditional model of grab two of the most deserving and best guys and put them in there on a one-off, I think that's the heavyweight championship right there. I think you put Mitrione and Roy Nelson. How they have to fight right out of the gate, bad for them and good for the rest of us, because one of those hammers gets eliminated. Vegas says Mitrione is the favorite. I tend to support that, but I have to admit, he fought Roy before, and Roy beat him. So there's no doubt Roy can win this fight. He's already won it before. Mitrione's gone on and done some great things and has some momentum. So I do think that a big dark horse in this tournament is whoever comes out between Mo and Bader. I'll also give you a little backstory here that a lot of people don't know. Those guys have a past. They met up in the NCAA quarterfinal round, and Mo beat him. Mo beat Bader 8-3. They both ended up being All-Americans, but that's always pissed Bader off, and there's a good story there. And they were also supposed to fight at Madison Square Garden, and Mo got hurt, and the fight didn't happen. So we've been promised this one before. I'm glad it's going to happen. Mo also does his best work with bigger guys. He's so explosive, and he hits so fast, and those bigger guys that can't get out of the way. Mo's got some incredible wins at heavyweight. I don't think anyone's looking past him. And we know how good Bader is. Bader's a sitting world champion right now. Just moved into the tournament. So I think that's a really fun one. And I really, Frank and Fedor, I'm not quite on board with everybody else writing Fedor off. I'm not writing him off. I still believe in him. I think he's had some weird circumstance, even his last fight. I mean, him and Mitrione knock each other down at the same time. It was weird. There was some circumstance there. So, and Frank Mir's a two-time world champion for a reason. So there's some hammers out there, and I'm just not sure how this thing's going to play out.
Couple quick ones for you, Chael. In the sport, what is your opinion of the best division?
So there's only a debate. I won't even Eve, I'm always open to talk. Who am I to be the final authority? But I will tell you, I get a little stubborn on this. I really won't listen unless you're talking about 145 or is it 155, because it's those two weight classes, and whatever one's the hardest, then the other's the second hardest, and then you have everybody else. Even just human beings, there are more people walking this planet that weigh between 145 and 155 pounds than there are that weigh between 205 and 265 pounds. So, the heavyweights get all the credit in the sport, but it's just not a reality. It's one of the reasons why I'm so impressed with what Conor McGregor did. I don't know which weight class is tougher, but I know he won the strap in both of them, and that's got to mean something. But to answer your question, it's between 45 and 55, and as it stands right now, I will go with 55.
I agree with that, actually. So
Yeah.
so I appreciate that statement. Also, I think for the women at 125, with this 125 by weight class coming into the UFC and Bellator already having it, most women walk around 125 pounds. Most athletic women.
Yep.
So I think that weight class is going to be very strong for the women's division also. Yep. What do you think there?
Yeah, I think it's fun. It needs a little time to build, but the women have really won us over. And I guess I didn't know this about myself, but I think I had a bit of a chauvinistic attitude at one point because I really didn't want to see women fight. And the women that won me over, it started in boxing. It started with the Layla Ali's and the Ann Wolfs, and I started watching this boxing. And wait a minute, this is impressive. This is grit and this is skill, and I really underestimated them. And then we started to see that fold over into MMA. And all of a sudden, some of the gutsiest performances of the night, were coming from the women. And so as these divisions form, if you start to see these people rise to the top, Joanna, I know it's Joanna non-champion right now, but she has some very impressive skills. I mean, the things she can do with Muay Thai, her ability to push the pace, and then we find out she's not even the best. Turns out Rose is, and Rose has been beat before. So a good division is always going to have that parity. A really good sport never has a clear-cut person. It's always competitive. And, as these divisions play out, man, I think it's been a lot of fun. It's hard to know who the best is, but I agree with you that for women at 125 in a couple of years, as it has time to develop, I think we're really going to see some depth. 1 through 10 there will be household names.
I agree with that.
Awesome.
And I think with the women also, we see a lot of these women who have just now started competing in martial arts and combat sports, but these women who've been doing it for a long time, like Joanna, Shevchenko, Cyborg, Nunes, they have this advantage. And after the sport has been around for a bit, we're going to see those weight classes just kind of elevate themselves to that point where we see the 155 and 45 pounders in the men.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think so too. Where's Holly Holm going to go? There's so many questions, but just a number of years ago, the women were just never really a talk. I mean, they really earned their spot. They didn't have anything given to them. And I think they deserve a lot of credit, and I think they should feel very good about themselves. They achieved a lot in a short period of time.
Now, Chael, having you here, this is a big thing for me because you are one of these guys who's great inside the cage, but you also know the sport so well, and you have solid opinions that are very thought through. So I want to ask you one thing about these suspensions that have been coming up since USADA has come along. On these big suspensions, some guys get suspended for 2. Was it Francisco Rivera?
4 years.
He's getting a suspension for 4 years. Now that's a huge thing. That's like telling somebody to go find a new job, in my opinion. How do you feel about these huge suspensions like that?
That whole thing is very tough. I mean, you've got two schools of thought, and I would tell you before we even get into it, the USADA school of thought is the right one, right? Clean sport and period, and the end of that, and we're the judge and jury. They win the argument, but there is an argument. There is an argument here to say, hey, wait a minute. You changed the rules. You never really told anybody what they were. I mean, we saw an Olympian who, under USADA, a 14-year-old girl who lost her gold medal because she tested positive for 1/1000th of a trace of ibuprofen that has a street name of Advil. And we're all looking around going, wait a minute. Nobody knew that Advil was banned. Nobody. You've got to tell people your rules if you're going to be the judge, jury, and executioner. I think we're seeing some of that. Even with the Rivera case, Rivera had apparently, in their opinion, had tried to lie to them, had tried to give them a swerve. And, that upset them and cost them a little bit more. And, I'm not sure that that's really how the courts would work. That seems to kind of be the system when you're on the defense. You put your best defense forward. So I'm not really sure that even got to play out very well. 4 years sure seemed pretty steep to me, particularly when you look at John Jones, who's failed 3 tests and 2 for steroids. Will not cop to it, will not admit to it, and I think they're going to give him the low end, which is 2 years. They're between 2 and 4. I think they're going to give him the low end. Quite frankly, I think that's fair. I don't think he deserves any more than 2 years. But if you were to weigh that against, Rivera, who they feel was a little bit dishonest, can't even prove he was dishonest, they just believe he was, I think that, I'm not sure there's a good precedence there.
Are you in favor of any of these fighter unions to help protect the fighters during these type of, positive tests? Because you see it in the NFL and stuff. Usually the NFLPA steps up and handles some of this. Right now, fighters kind of have to represent themselves against the commission.
I think there's a narrative there. I think that I would listen to debate on that. It's again, and I have to be careful, particularly with my background. I've failed more of these tests than I've passed, but I don't come from this from a poor me standpoint. It wasn't that at all. It's just saying, well, let's have some rules, let's have some clarity on it, but let's also have some fairness. You have to understand, and nobody talks about this, but the commission will find you guilty. You then get to say your piece in front of that commission. In the history of this sport of combat, in the history of the time commissions had set up, and there's 50 of them within this country alone, not one time have they ever voted against themselves. So the media loves to tell you, well, he'll have his day in court, and innocent until proven guilty. There is no day in court. A day in court represents a judge that is a disinterested third party. You don't get that. You get to go before the very commission that found you guilty. That's a state entity. So if that state entity kept you out of a fight, buried your name, lost you sponsors, and then admits they had it wrong, they are subject to a lawsuit. So there is no circumstance in the political system where they would ever go, yeah, we blew this one, see you in court, and we're admitting now we were wrong.
Yep.
That would never happen and has never happened. So when a fighter comes in and goes, listen, maybe I was wrong, maybe I wasn't, let's look at the rules, but let's get in front of a judge, a disinterested third party, that's the only way you can do things. To be found guilty by a commission, that have to stand in front of that commission, when in the history of times 50 municipalities, not one has ever been wrong. That's one hell of a good run, gentlemen. That's a good run, or that's unfair. You decide.
Now, do you have any suggestions to bring that about so that fighters do get a voice, fighters do get heard when they?
No. The way that it's set up right now through the state agencies, it's very clear. And they operate under the discretion. They operate under the pleasure of the governor, but at the discretion of the Attorney General's office. And it's very clear in all 50 states, you must exhaust all your options before you could take it to a court. So that just means you have to keep going back in front of the commission. Well, then those guys try to get cute and they kick the can down the road. And, well, we can't see you for 8 months. Well, the suspension was only 12. So what do I want to do? Go broke here, waste all of my time, tie it up in the court system another 12 months, or just sit on the sideline? And at no point in this am I saying that some innocent guys went down. I mean, they're doing a really good job of catching people. If you wanted to have a dialogue, though, on is it fair that they are the judge, jury, and executioner, I think there's some talk there, and I think you come to the conclusion that no, you do need a judge, you need a disinterested third party, and no matter how much the media likes to say, well, he's innocent until proven guilty, that's in a court of law, and the athlete doesn't get a court of law.
Yeah,
Bummer.
That's pretty deep, and I like how you broke that down. That's really clear for
Yep.
anybody that's.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you guys an example, and this is very silly. I realize how silly I'm being, but I want to make it because people will understand this point. When I talk to you about, I'll use myself for an example. I have never taken a steroid in my life, and I've never even been accused of it. But as soon as I failed one of those tests, guys, that's all the headline said. It was a steroid test, and it was for steroids. So I always steered into it. I always went into it, told people I had more juice than Tropicana. I used all these lines to let people know they could shove it up their ass. But the bottom line was, I realized what I was up against. The perception was the reality. And, you end up in these messes. Anytime BJ Penn's a great example. BJ Penn officially failed a drug test. If you look a little bit closer, not only did he never take a drug, he was never even accused of taking a drug, but this IV gimmick somehow fell in the same scope that nobody understood, and they made him sit. That's ridiculous, and nobody knows these rules, and there's no room for extenuating circumstance. There's no room to explain this. So with that in mind, I go before a commission. All 5 of them are drinking coffee. Okay, they're accusing me of doing wrong while they're drinking coffee. What's the relevance? Well, the relevance is this. Under the WADA code, if you have 2 cups of coffee within a 15-minute period, your caffeine levels will make you be in violation and you will have to sit. So while they're judging me, they're all drinking.
Well, Chael, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. You know, it was episode 5.
This is episode 5. Chael, you're the headliner on our episode 5, and we definitely want to get you back. You have such a knowledge of the game. You know how to speak about every part of the game. You're so educated on the whole sport, and this was like a masterclass. This is actually was like a masterclass, and I have to say thank you so much, man.
Yeah, and congratulations on, you know, what I say, one of the biggest wins of your career against the guy that, you know, goes down as one of the greatest light heavyweights.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I really appreciate it, fellas. Keep up the good work, and I will come back anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good luck in the semifinals.
Ching. Get it
Thank you.
Go get that other, then the next big win in your career. And the reason why it's the biggest, Chael, is because of how much he weighs. That's why.
It's true. It's true. You're right. Numbers don't lie. Take care, fellas.
Thanks
Take care,
again.
Chael.
Take it easy. Gangster. Chael
There we
Sonnen.
have it. Chael Gangster on the Thug Jitsu Master and Squid episode 5 with a big win over Quinton Rampage Jackson.
It was a huge win, man. Going into that fight, I thought Rampage would have the advantage just because of the size advantage.
Yep.
And maybe he did, but Chael said, you know what? Screw your advantage. I'm going to show you what the Gangster is all about.
Yeah, Rampage looked thick.
That's a nice way of putting it. He did look thick.
He looked thick.
He had a lot of junk in that trunk.
Yeah. He, I don't know what he was thinking with that size. Definitely put on a lot of weight. Definitely didn't.
He was thinking ketchup.
He was thinking ketchup and eating and.
Basically putting ketchup on his fries, on his burgers, and on everything else. So, again, congratulations, Chael. Now he's going to run into the winner of Fedor Emelianenko, who is most people, virtually everybody considers the GOAT, and then Frank Mir, who is a great heavyweight champion in the UFC also.
Whoever he faces, he's going to face a top 20 heavyweight of all time.
Of all time. Top 10.
You put Frank Mir top 10?
Of all time so far, yeah.
Yeah, you think
absolutely.
so?
I mean,
Yeah, I guess I'd maybe have him maybe 10 or 11. I do rank a lot of the newer guys kind of above him.
Yeah, I don't, only because of the time that they came into the sport. I mean, yeah, they can beat Frank Mir now, but in his
But at
prime,
one time, he was the best man in the world.
world.
You know, he was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
And he was the heavyweight champion when Fedor was running Pride.
Yeah.
So this is
That was a fight that was supposed to happen.
and we're getting it now. And I'm
All
looking
these
forward
fights were supposed to happen.
We were. And Chael gets the winner of that. I would like to see. I would prefer to see Chael versus Fedor.
Yep.
Because of the Team Quest history against Fedor.
Yeah, and the size.
And the size.
The
I think
size.
it'll be more competitive,
Fedor
more
used to
fun.
fight around in the 230s.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have Frank Mir is going to walk into that ring at like 270, 280. That's a
lot.
That's a tough fight. That's going to be a slow moving fight. If Mir ends up on top, I would not put it past him to being able to submit Chael or gain really dominant position. Because once Mir's on top of you, that's tough.
Yeah.
Even if you take him down, the way he rolls for leg locks, he moves a little more like a welterweight or a little guy. Yeah. So my only gripe with this first round is you just had Chael face Rampage on January 20th. Then you have Mitrione and Roy Nelson in February. Then you take off a whole month, and then you fight in April, Fedor versus Mir, and then you take another month and you fight in May. So the first round doesn't compete January, February, March, April, May. So 5 months go by to compete the first round.
Yeah.
So you're talking about almost half a year to compete just the first round when you have semifinals and finals next. And based
Chael-
on injuries, they stack some of the time against these guys, not giving them maybe some of the recovery. Because I'm assuming they're going to try to make a New Year's Bellator show. I think that's kind of what they're going to gear up towards.
Yeah, but that's good for guys like Chael in the fact that he's just saying how sore he was, and he's bruised and a little sore from the fight. He's gonna have the longest break.
It's great for him. It's probably the best for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, he can sit back, watch the fights happen. He could start to, if there's some stuff that Emelianenko or Mir does that he may be kind of like, ooh, that I might be kind of worried about that. He has
There's time
a long time to work on it. So like, there's ever a shadow of a doubt of a move not working, he's gonna have 6 months before he even gets back in there. Yeah, I think the only thing may be ring rust, but I don't think Chael really feels that.
Yeah, I don't think ring rust is a real thing for guys that are still active and not injured.
Yep.
When you're able to go into the gym every single day, and you're not stuck sitting at home and resting, and you're not using your muscles, you don't necessarily get ring rust, because once you step in there and the first exchange happens, whether it be a grappling exchange or a punching or kicking exchange, you kind of just settled into being back in that position again.
Yep. Yeah, well, that was fun.
It was a lot of
Good old Chael Sonnen.
Getting once again the Oregon Gangster Chael Sonnen on the show. Thank you again, Chael.
Thank you so much. And we did some Bellator coverage. We're gonna talk to some UFC fighters, talk about some UFC fights. We got some Bellator fights to talk about as well.
Bellator fights coming up
Lorenz
this
Larkin
weekend.
fighting this weekend.
You going down?
I'm thinking about it.
You're thinking about it, and I'm going to be out of town, so I'm going to miss it.
I'm
If I was
thinking
here,
about it.
We would definitely go, but now now the Squid is on his own and has to make the trip alone,
I don't mind.
so he doesn't mind.
I'm a loner.